She slapped me for spilling wine at her wedding, so I canceled the wedding, not out of rage, not with shouting, just a signature, and the quiet unraveling of everything she thought she controlled. It wasn't even my fault. She turned too fast, knocked the glass out of my hand, then screamed at me like I was dirt on her shoes, in front of 200 guests, a woman in a white dress, a man beside her, too stunned to speak, and me, in a plain black uniform, holding an empty tray. Not a word came out of my mouth. I just stood there, wine soaking through the hem of my pants, while cameras flashed and laughter rippled through the crowd like a sickness. Then she told me to kneel. Clean it up. Right now. On your knees. So I did. I kneeled on the ballroom floor in front of the same girl who used to laugh at my lunchbox in high school, the same girl who once told me I'd never be more than the quiet one who doesn't belong. I wiped the spill slowly, like she asked, not for her sake, but because it gave me time to breathe, time to remember who I really was, and who she'd just humiliated. She didn't know me, not really, but she was about to. My name is Evelyn Cho. I'm 38 years old, executive director of the Ocean Crown Hotel in Sarasota, Florida. If you Googled me, you wouldn't find much. No social media, no LinkedIn profile, no interviews in glossy trade magazines. That's on purpose. People think power is loud, but I've found that the most effective kind, the kind that actually shifts things, moves in silence. I was appointed to run the Ocean Crown 3 months ago. It's one of the most profitable locations in our chain. We host political fundraisers, celebrity galas, 7-figure weddings. My father built this empire from a roadside motel and left it in my hands, though most of the senior board still thinks I'm temporary. They don't know I'm not here to prove myself. I'm here to clean house. And I don't mean linens. You see, I have a habit. Every few weeks I ditch the title. No heels, no nameplate, no boardroom briefings. I put on the plain black uniform and walk among my staff, serving drinks, bussing tables, folding towels in laundry. It's the only way to hear the truth. When people think you're just a server, they don't filter what they say. And sometimes what they say is exactly what needs to be heard. That night, the ballroom had been transformed into a garden of white roses and floating lights. The bride insisted on imported orchids, a customized scent pumped through the air vents, and a vegan menu that cost more than a car. Everything was designed to be captured, flawless, shareable, unforgettable. I'd been assigned to the VIP section near the front. Ironically, I hadn't planned to work the event. But when I saw the booking name 3 days earlier, I changed shifts without a word. Hannah Green. That was the name on the wedding file. Back in high school, she was the girl who told me, "We don't sit with ESL kids." The one who called me Evie the Mouse. I hadn't seen her in 20 years. And that was the point. She didn't recognize me. None of them did. Her bridesmaids, her mother, the groomsmen. Not even the girl who used to borrow my notes in algebra and laugh with me over cafeteria fries. They looked right through me, the same way they probably looked through every housekeeper, every valet, every cook who made their special day possible. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I just watched. And when I carried that tray of wine toward their table, I wasn't thinking about revenge. I was thinking about posture, balance, angles of approach, skills I'd honed during 1,000 events just like this. But fate doesn't care how prepared you are. Sometimes all it takes is one careless turn, and a fall that reveals everything. I didn't drop the glass. She spun too fast in that oversized dress, brushing the tray with her elbow, and the stemware tumbled forward like dominoes, 1, 2, 3, before crashing onto the marble. The red wine bloomed across the ivory floor like blood in snow. She gasped theatrically, then turned to me with fire in her eyes. "Are you blind?" she snapped. Heads turned. The string quartet stuttered mid-note. I started, but she cut me off. "You stupid girl. You just ruined my dress." Her voice was loud enough to bounce off the chandelier, loud enough to silence the band, loud enough for the guests at table 12 to turn their heads and start recording. She didn't recognize me. Still, even in that moment, when her words sliced through the room, I was just the help. Then her mother joined in, a tall woman in a sequined navy dress, lips painted like lacquer, eyes sharp as broken glass. She took one look at me and sneered. "What kind of hotel hires untrained trash like this?" She didn't wait for an answer. No professionalism, no upbringing, no class. Each word dropped like a gavel. The guests started murmuring, phones lifted, camera lenses focused. And me? I stood still. Not out of fear, but out of calculation. I've learned something, you know. The moment people believe you're beneath them is the moment they stop pretending to be kind. And that's when they show you who they really are. Then came the third blow. From the left, I heard a laugh. Short, familiar. I turned. It was Maya. She used to be my lab partner. We once built a solar system out of papier-mâché and stayed after school eating Cheez-Its and dreaming about college. She looked me up and down with a smirk. "Evie," she said, like tasting something sour. Then to the group, "Wow. Guess some people really were born to carry trays, not textbooks." That one stung. Not because it was cruel, but because it came from someone who used to know better. I didn't flinch, didn't cry, didn't throw the tray. I just picked up the broken glass one piece at a time and waited for what would come next. The wine kept spreading, seeping across the ballroom floor, under her dress, toward the edge of the stage, a puddle of deep red beneath pure white. She looked down at it, then at me, and curled her lip like I was a stain that couldn't be scrubbed out. Then she said it. "Get on your knees. Clean it up." I blinked. For a second I thought I misheard, but the silence confirmed it. Even the violins had stopped pretending. Someone in the back coughed. Someone else muttered, "Whoa!" She repeated it, louder this time. "You spilled it. So get down and clean it. That's what you're paid for, right?" I could feel hundreds of eyes crawling across my back, judging, recording, silently voting whether I was drama-worthy or just background. I could have said no, could have stood tall, whispered a quiet, "You'll regret that," and walked away. But instead, I lowered myself. Not for her, for me. I knelt, deliberately, knees hitting marble with a controlled grace that came not from submission, but from discipline. I reached for the napkins, folded one, dabbed gently, then another. I didn't rush, didn't shake, didn't mutter. Her mother scoffed. The bride folded her arms. I heard a man's voice say, "This is awkward." Someone else whispered, "God, she really is cleaning it." Yes, I was. Because I'd rather be the one cleaning a mess than the one becoming it. And in that moment, I wasn't kneeling in shame. I was positioning myself, low to the ground, yes, but in full view of everyone, where humiliation could be seen, where memory would root itself, and where the fall would look higher. When I stood back up, I was just about to stand. The spill was mostly cleaned. My knees ached against the floor, but I'd kept my balance, my rhythm, like I was performing a slow, precise dance meant to shame no one but expose everything. Then it happened. She stepped forward, heels clicking like gunfire on the tile, and stood barely a foot from me. I looked up. She was flushed, breathing harder than the moment called for. "Still here?" she hissed. "You think wiping the floor makes it better?" I didn't respond. What could I have said? "You knocked it over? This won't matter in 5 years?" No answer would have satisfied her. She didn't want a response. She wanted a target. And I was right there, low and easy to reach. Without warning, her hand sliced through the air. Open palm, sharp angle. It cracked across my cheek like the snap of a flag in the wind. A collective gasp followed. A few guests stood. A glass clinked to the floor somewhere. I felt the burn bloom across my skin, but I didn't move. She stood over me, triumphant, like she'd just put a servant back in her place. "Get out of my sight!" she spat. "You've ruined everything!" I stayed still for 3 full seconds. 3 slow, silent seconds where even the cameras forgot to click. Then I stood, not fast, not in anger, just upright, 1 inch at a time, and looked her dead in the eye. I didn't say a word, because the next thing I would do would say everything. As I walked away, I could feel it. Not the sting on my face, not the ache in my knees, but the silence. That horrible hanging silence after a slap lands and everyone waits to see what the nobody will do. I didn't give them a show. No screaming, no tears, no tray-throwing meltdown. Just 5 steps. Steady, controlled. Back toward the service hallway, toward the exit sign no one usually notices. But someone noticed me now. I saw the phone, just out of the corner of my eye. Held high. Framed perfectly. The bride standing with her hand still in midair. Me on Polvella. Red wine on white tile. And a guest. Some girl in a lilac dress with too much blush. Giggling as she typed a caption. "Karen humbles a waitress on her big day tar wedding fail tar drama." By the time I reached the back corridor, it had already begun. Buzz. Buzz. My earpiece lit up with a message from another staff member. "Hey, you okay? Someone's uploading the slap video on Insta. It's going viral in our staff group already." Another ping. "She really hit you? WTF? People are memeing it now. You want me to report?" And then another. "This is disgusting. I'm saving this for HR if you want backup." It spread like wildfire. Quiet, internal, but powerful. Not to the public feed. Not yet. But among my people. The workers, the invisible, the ones who'd wiped tables while being called slow, who'd smiled at insults, who'd been told to be grateful for the tip. They saw what happened, and they didn't laugh. They remembered. And that? That was the beginning of something far stronger than revenge. It was solidarity, and it was growing. I was almost past the main hall when I saw her, standing near the bar, half hidden behind a cluster of tall flower arrangements, holding a champagne flute like it was the only thing keeping her anchored. Claire. She hadn't changed much. Still wore her hair tucked behind one ear. Still had that same delicate way of folding her arms when nervous. Claire wasn't part of the bridal party. She was a guest. Probably a pity invite from college days or a mutual cousin. But she had been different. In high school, she once stood between me and a group of boys who thought it was funny to bark "ching chong" in the hallway. She used to pass me notes in class with hand-drawn comics when I was too scared to speak. She made me feel seen. And now, she saw me again. Our eyes met. Just for a second. I thought, maybe she'd say something. Maybe she'd step forward, even just a little. Maybe she'd offer a nod, a look, a whisper of, "Are you okay?" But she didn't. She hesitated, took one small step forward, then looked around, at the bride, at the guests, at the cameras, and she turned away. Not in disgust, not in hate, but in fear. She took a sip of her drink, adjusted her necklace, and blended into the crowd like I never existed. That moment, that was the last crack I needed. Because nothing stings like silence when it comes from someone who once gave you a voice. The hallway behind the ballroom was empty. Only the hum of the HVAC system and my own footsteps echoed off the service walls. I walked past linen carts and stacked trays, past interns pretending not to stare. No one said anything. They'd all seen it. I reached the elevator and used a key card that few people in the building even knew existed. Rode up 3 floors, stepped into the glass-walled operations room that oversaw the entire property. It was quiet, clinical, full of screens and buttons. The digital dashboard glowed a soft blue. Event status, active client name, Green Hollingsworth wedding. Estimated remaining duration, 4 hours 15 minutes. Estimated guests, 212 current expenditures, $184,700. I tapped the screen, entered my override credentials, scanned my fingertip. A prompt appeared. Suspend event? This action will pause all vendor operations and trigger internal protocol review. I clicked yes. A small chime sounded. Status changed. Suspended. Pending policy breach investigation somewhere downstairs, the lights would shift. The DJ would be notified. The kitchen staff would halt dessert prep. And the bride, still basking in her imagined victory, would soon discover she'd won the wrong war. Less than 2 minutes later, the door opened. Derek Liu walked in. Regional Operations Chief, crisp gray suit, always 5 minutes late unless something was on fire. He looked around the room like it had personally offended him, then saw me at the console. "Why was the green wedding suspended?" he demanded. His voice was clipped, rehearsed. I turned slowly, met his eyes, didn't blink. Because the client physically assaulted a staff member. He frowned. That's not cause for total event suspension without escalation. I cut him off, calm as ice. She slapped me, Derek, on camera, in front of over 200 guests. He froze, looked me up and down, suddenly registering the faint red imprint on my cheek, then glanced at the console, saw the login still active. Miss Tran, Executive Director. Something shifted in his face, a hesitation, a recalibration. You were working the floor? I was auditing frontline service conditions, disguised as per internal policy. He said nothing, just nodded. I picked up the phone, dialed events coordination. Please bring Ms. Green, her mother, and their attorney, if present, to boardroom C in 10 minutes. This is now a contractual matter. No emotion in my voice, no vengeance, just procedure. In the boardroom, I sat at the head of the table. 3 employees flanked me, HR, legal, and on-site compliance. The bride burst in first, eyes wide, lips trembling. Her mother behind her, louder than ever. You think this little stunt will keep us from getting what we paid for? I didn't respond. I slid the contract across the table. Highlighted clause 17.4. Client behavior resulting in physical harm to staff is grounds for immediate termination of services without refund. They screamed, threatened, swore they'd sue, but the footage had already been uploaded to our secure server. The timestamps matched. The internal memo was logged. The policy held. I stood, collected my folder, and said simply, "Your event is over. Please vacate the property within the hour." Back in the control room, I confirmed the termination order. 1 click at a time. Cancel floral vendor contract, revoke audio-visual service access, shut down kitchen production and beverage service, lock event lighting presets, suspend valet ticket validation. A text popped up from floor supervisor. Bride's party is demanding champagne, says they paid for joy, not policy. I replied with a single line. No further service is to be rendered. No exceptions. Within 15 minutes, the ballroom dimmed. The string lights were unplugged. The dessert cart was wheeled back into storage. The live band packed up mid-song. Guests wandered in confusion, murmuring. Some filmed it, others whispered theories, but no official explanation was given. I didn't need to shout. I just removed the stage. By the time I got back to my office, the staff comms channel was flooded. Dozens of messages. Just saw the footage. I've dreamed of doing what you just did. Finally, someone stood up and didn't apologize for it. Thank you for reminding us we're not invisible. Miss Tran, you just gave every dishwasher here a reason to walk taller tonight. One message from a senior concierge read simply, you didn't raise your voice, but you raised the bar. I didn't reply. I just read them, every line, let them settle in my chest, because the applause I needed wasn't public. It was private, quiet, and real. Before leaving, I made one last stop. The ballroom was nearly empty now. White rose petals scattered across the floor like regrets. Half-eaten appetizers abandoned on plates. Guests either gone or pretending they hadn't witnessed a collapse. The bride stood near the archway, makeup smudged, dress stained, hands clenched. Her mother beside her, still demanding a manager, never realizing she already had. I didn't speak to them. Instead, I nodded to a staff member carrying a mop. Clean the spill zone, I said. Make it spotless. The staffer raised an eyebrow. That's already been wiped, ma'am. I know, I said. Then I stepped closer to the bride, close enough for her to hear. I just thought I'd follow your instructions. One last time. She didn't reply, couldn't, and I walked out, not triumphant, but whole. The video was gone by morning. HR flagged it, legal issued takedowns, and our internal platform auto-scrubbed the most shared clips. Clean, efficient, sanitized. But the damage, or perhaps the justice, had already settled. By then, the footage had already reached hundreds of inboxes. Screenshots had been saved. Stories told over break room coffee. Not just in Ocean Crown, but across 6 other properties in our region. One manager texted me, "If they don't promote you, we riot quietly and efficiently." Another wrote, "I've never seen a takedown that didn't use fists, but still hit harder than a punch." But the message that meant the most came from a name I hadn't seen in years. Jordan, the young intern I once forgot. The one I failed to help when he needed a reference. His message was short. I saw what you did. I remembered who you were. Turns out, I still want to be like you. I stared at the screen for a long time. Some victories aren't loud. They don't go viral. They echo in places no algorithm can reach. The following week, I resumed my audits. Same black uniform, same silence. But something had changed. Not the cameras, not the policies, the posture. Staff no longer looked down when I passed. Not because they knew who I was, most still didn't, but because the shape of respect had shifted. Guests started saying thank you a little faster. Managers paused before barking. Even the snobbiest weekend regulars hesitated before snapping their fingers. Fear? Maybe. But I hoped it was something deeper. Recognition. The dawning realization that anyone in uniform might hold a key card, or at least might deserve dignity. And that was enough for me. I didn't want worship, just memory, the kind that lingers quietly every time someone is tempted to shout at the person clearing their plate. I didn't keep the footage. I didn't print the headlines. I didn't frame the contract termination letter, though someone from legal joked I should. I let it all go. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I no longer needed to remember it out of pain. What she did to me, the shouting, the slap, the demand to kneel, it wasn't new. Not really. That kind of power play, it happens every day. In restaurants, in offices, in marriages, in politics. It's not always a slap. Sometimes it's a word, a silence, a look. And most of the time, no one fights back, because fighting back feels like becoming them. But that night, I learned something. You can hold people accountable without holding on to the anger. You can draw a line, not to punish, but to protect. You can stand up, not to crush others, but to lift yourself. I didn't expose her for revenge. I ended the wedding because no one should be allowed to humiliate another human being and still be handed dessert. And maybe, just maybe, if enough of us choose to respond with clarity instead of cruelty, the world doesn't have to keep burning for us to feel seen. I don't need them to bow. I just need them to stop standing taller by stepping on someone else.